Well, this morning on my walk I've come to the Kennet and Avon Canal, and I'm going to start here because we're going to a lost canal which is just not far from here. And I've come to Semmington in Wiltshire, which is not far from where I live, and we're going to have a great time. So come with me and we'll have a look into it all. Canals offer a peaceful way of life for people, something to pull themselves off of the grid. And you've got to appreciate the community as you walk down here. And it's very interesting to see, you're having a look at people's houses really, because they obviously live on the canal. And there's some leisure boaters as well. But it's a great place to have a walk, and probably canal paths are the most heavily used paths in the UK. There's plenty of wildlife to look at as you walk along the corridor, like these lovely swans here, just sunning themselves in the first part of sunny weather we've had for some time. Well, just behind me here is a small aqueduct, and this takes the Kennet and Avon on in the direction that we're going to the Lost Canal in. And this was the Kennet and Avon was completed in 1810, the same year as the Lost Canal was completed. And there is something about these canals that really is the sad part about them all in their peak years, and what they actually caused. It won't be too long now and we'll be at the area, but it's a very pleasant walk past all these boats, or I should say barges, and the canal that was dug by hand. And you think of those poor chaps, and there were up to 250,000 of the canal navvies, as they called them, that were working in the period where the canal was built, both the Kennet and Avon and the one that we're going to go and have a look at. And that comes from the word navigator. And then they later went on to work on the railways, and then from there on to work on the roads. So they were a sustainable part of the economy when you consider they just did it with shovels, wheelbarrows, picks and axes and things like that. So amazing feat in what they did, and the Kennet and Avon itself is just an amazing canal to walk along, boat along, even kayak along. Very nice indeed. And you can see how pleasant and peaceful it just is being here, with the canal activity going on and the boats on the canal on the Kennet and Avon. And it's lovely. But obviously in its working day it would have been quite a busy area. Well, now stood up by one of the lots here on the Kennet and Avon, I think it's time to head off and go and have a look at this old forgotten canal. Forgotten, disused, abandoned, who knows. But we'll go and have a look at it and see what we think. And this is the junction here, and just over here is the old entrance there to the Wiltshire and Berkshire Canal, which was finished at 1810, just the same as the Kennet and Avon. So from 1810 to 1840 were the peak years of both canals. They were transporting materials from Brunel's railway, and then when the railway took off, obviously the canals then went into decline. So it's sad really that they helped build the canals and then helped build the railways through all the materials they brought, and the railways effectively shut them down. So in 1914 the canal closed down. behind me here is Semmington Humpback Bridge. Many a lorry has come to a fate on here and ground it out. And just before I started to film, a car actually came along and jumped it. Very strange. Well, I've come over to the other side of the canal before we go and have a look at the old canal, because you get the best view of the old bridge that's been filled in from this location. So hence that's my reason why. This old house you can see here was the toll house for the Wiltshire and Berkshire Canal. So that's where you would pay your premium before going down it. And this was the first section of canal to be built on the total canal length of 52 miles. Well, this tree line off to my right here is the old Wiltshire and Berkshire Canal. Well, I now stood on what would have been the towpath for the old canal. So horses would have come down here towing the boats, all on their way to Abingdon. And this section of canal was the first section to be built and was in use for around about 100 years before it then went redundant. So that's what we're here to see, and that's what we're here to look at, is this piece of canal. And you can see behind me here that the canal still does hold water, which is incredible. So it would have been a clay-lined structure hewn out by the navvies. We must have had communities going all the way along. But the interesting part about this is the first section to have been built of the Wiltshire and Berkshire Canal. So the Canal Act came about 1796. So the actual building of the canal itself would be in the region of 1798-99. This was started by hand, but not open till 1810 when the Kennet and Avon opened. And sad to think that they transported all the materials for the railways, and the railways is what eventually shut down the canal. It just became uneconomical to keep, and that is why it closed down. And all those sections are restored now, or are being restored. This section will never be restored because they're looking at a new route further across the fields over to the west side of where I am at the present time. But it's just great to come out and have a look at a canal which is no longer used and has converted itself into a nature reserve. So an interesting thing to come and see in our area, and I'm on the last part of it now before it disappears in Melksham. Pops up in a couple of places in Lowbourne, Melksham, and then out towards the fields towards Sandy Lane and Lakehock, and then there's some restored sections after Lakehock. And when they do eventually restore the canal, it won't be this section ever, because they're looking at a new route to go through Melksham. Sad in some ways, but nice to see, and nice to know that you can look at a lost canal in our area without too much difficulty and enjoy a good walk before on another canal which was restored in the 1970s to the 1990s, then opened by the Queen, which was the Kennet and Avon. So the Wiltshire and Berkshire Canal is a gem to come and see this, and just well worth a little visit.